Good morning, children. Good morning. Today we are going to start with a new topic, footprint without feet. Footprint without feet. Okay. About the author. Herbert George Bell was born on 21st September 1866 in England. He was a great writer who wrote novels, history and science fictions. The most famous work of H.G. Wells are The Time Machine, The Invisible Man, and The Island of Dr. Moreau. He died on 13th August 1946. Theme of the story. The story Footprints Without Feet describes the story of a brilliant scientist, Griffin, who degenerated himself into a lawless person. Griffin discovered that human body could become transparent and invisible, but he misused his great discovery. He did not use the power of invisibility for the welfare of the society and humanity at large. He misused it to threaten, trouble, and beat innocent persons and rob them. He made illegal entries in stores and shops and stole things from there. He committed a burglary in a clergyman's house in Epping. Griffin remained invisible or unseen only when he was without clothes. If he put on clothes, he lost his invisibility and could be seen by the people around him. The lesson gives a message that misuse of science and its great discoveries can make even a brilliant scientist like Griffin a monster and a threatening, lawless person. Let's know about the short summary of Footprints Without Feet by H.G. Wells. Muddy imprints. Two boys were highly surprised. They saw muddy impressions on the steps of a house in London. They were the fresh footmarks of a barefooted man. The boys followed them. The impressions got fainter and finally disappeared. Mystery of footmarks. The mystery of footmarks was quite simple. The boys were following a scientist. He had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. Griffin, great but eccentric scientist. Griffin was a great scientist. He carried out many experiments to prove that human body could become invisible. In the end, he swallowed some rare drugs and his body became transparent. He was a lawless person. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. In revenge, Griffin set his house on fire. Unseen when naked, Griffin had to remove all his clothes if wanted to be unseen by the people. He became a homeless wanderer without clothes. He had no money. He left footmarks as he walked. In a big London store, the air was bitterly cold. Griffin was naked. Instead of walking about the streets, he entered a London store for warmth. He enjoyed the pleasure of clothes and food freely. He fitted himself out with warm clothes there. He became fully dressed up with shoes and overcoat and a hat. After putting on clothes, he became visible. He had cold meat and coffee, sweets and wine from the grocery store. He slept on a pile of quilts. He didn't wake up until the assistants arrived next morning. When they came near, he panicked and began to run, but he could become invisible only he was totally naked. So he took off his newly found clothes. Once more, he became naked in the chilly January air. In Drury Lane, he hurried to Drury Lane, the center of the theatre world. He found a shop he was searching. He came upstairs invisible. He came out of the shop wearing bandages round for his forehead, dark glasses, false nose, side whiskers, and a large hat. Then he attacked a shopkeeper and robbed him of all the money he could find. Arrival in Epping village. Griffin wanted to get away from the crowded London. He came to the village Epping. He booked 2 rooms in a local inn. Arrival of a stranger of such strange appearance became the talk of the people. Miss Hall tried to be friendly with her guest Griffin. He told that he didn't want to be disturbed. He wanted to be alone. She thought that her guest was an eccentric scientist. She didn't mind his strange habits and irritable temper. Griffin's cash finished. He told a lie that he was expecting a check at any moment. Clergyman burgled. A strange episode occurred. A clergyman and his wife were awakened by the noises in the study very early in the morning. They came downstairs and heard the chink of money being taken from the desk, with a poker in his hand. The clergyman flung open the door. He shouted surrender. He was surprised to see the room empty. They looked under the desk, behind the curtains, and even up the chimney. No one was there. They found the desk open and the money was missing. They were highly surprised, couldn't understand anything. Mrs. Hall's furniture shows strange behavior. The landlord and his wife, Mrs. Hall, woke up very early. They found Griffin's door wide open. Usually it was shut and locked. They peeped around but found bandages were lying about. All of a sudden Mrs. Hall heard a sniff close to her ear. A hat leaped up and dashed itself into her face. Then the chair became alive. They turned away in fear. Then the chair pushed them both out of the room. Then the door was slammed and locked after them. Mrs. Hall almost fell down the stairs and started crying. He was sure that the room was haunted by spirits. The villagers suspected that the trouble was caused by witchcraft. When the news of burglary at the clergyman's home became known, everyone doubted Griffin's hand in it. His suspicion grew stronger when Griffin suddenly showed some ready cash. He had no cash before a few days. Invisible man shows himself. Mrs. Hall went to Griffin's room. He was there. She asked what he was doing to her chairs upstairs. She also asked how he entered a locked room. The scientist lost his temper. He became furious and cried, I will show you. Suddenly he threw away all bandages, whiskers, spectacles, and even nose. The horrified men in the bar were staring at headless man. Encounter with Constable Jaffers. Encounter with Constable Jaffer. The police constable who had been informed arrived now. He was totally surprised. He was totally surprised to find that he was to arrest a man without a head. There followed a wonderful scene. The scientist Griffin started throwing his clothes one by one. He was becoming more and more invisible, and he threw off one garment after another. Finally, the man became invisible. Some people who tried to hold him were beaten by the unseen blows that came from nowhere. In the end, Jafar was knocked unconscious. Nervous and excited people were crying. Hold him. Griffin was invisible and free now. No one knew where to lay hands on him. The main points of the story. Two boys were surprised at the muddy footprints of a pair of bare feet. Griffin was a brilliant scientist who discovered that the human body could become invisible and transparent. Griffin became a lawless person. His landlord disliked him and wanted to eject him. In revenge, he set his house on fire. Griffin became a homeless wanderer without clothes and money. The air was bitterly cold in midwinter and Griffin could not do without clothes. So he entered a big London store to warm and feed himself. The invisible man pleased himself with wine and sweets and fitted himself with warm clothes. He slept on a pile of quilts. Griffin could be invisible only when he was naked. Next morning, the employees came and saw him because he was dressed up. Griffin ran away and became invisible by throwing off his clothes one by one. He came to Drury Lane, where he bandaged himself round the head, dark glass, false nose, big bushy side whiskers, and a large hat in a shop. Griffin left crowded London and came to the village of Epping. Mrs. Hall was pleased to have a guest in the winter and tried to be friendly with her guest. The stranger snubbed Mrs. Hall and told her not to disturb her anymore. Griffin had no cash and he burgled at a clergyman's house to get it. They surprised the clergyman and his wife, found their desk open and the money missing. They searched for the thief but were surprised not to find him anywhere. One day the landlord and his wife, Mrs. Hall, found their guest room widely open, which was usually kept shut and locked. They came to the stranger's room and found his hat hitting into Mrs. Hall's face. The chair started moving and pushed Mr. and Mrs. Hall out of the room. Mrs. Hall felt that the house was haunted by spirits and ghosts. Even the villagers thought so. One day Mrs. Hall asked her guest what he had been doing to her chair and how he entered a locked room. Then the scientist became furious and shouted, I will show you. Suddenly he threw off bandages, whiskers, spectacles and even nose. Mrs. Hall and the people in the bar were horrified, staring at a headless man. The constable Jaffer was informed and he came to arrest the stranger. The policeman tried to get hold of a man who started throwing his garments one by one and became invisible. Jaffer and the people who came to help him were hit blows from nowhere. Jaffer was knocked unconscious when he tried to hold on the unseen scientists. Then we come to the next is character sketch. Griffin. Griffin was an extraordinary and a brilliant scientist. He discovered that the human body could become invisible and transparent as a sheet of glass. It was the result of his long and constant experimentations. However, he misused his discovery only for the personal gains, committing theft and burglaries and beating and robbing innocent persons. He could have earned fame and respect had he utilized his great discovery for the welfare of humanity, but his activities made him a lawless and an anarchist. His invisibility was possible only when he didn't wear any clothes. If dressed up, he could lose his invisibility. He had to remain without clothes even in the chilly weather of midwinter to remain invisible. He had to make illegal entries and burglaries in a clergyman's house, a big store in London and a shop in Drury Lane. This brought him disrepute and dishonor instead of fame and respect. Then we come to Mrs. Hall, the landlord's wife at the local inn. She was more than happy to receive a guest in the lean session. Miss Hall was convinced that her strange guest was an eccentric scientist. She excused his strange habits and irritable behaviors because he had paid her in advance. When she noticed the strange behavior of a furniture in her guest room, she was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits. She dared to question even the eccentric scientist Griffin. She also asked to know how he entered a locked room. Next character, Jafar. He is a village constable. He is a very determined person. He is called to the inn when the stranger unveils himself and creates chaos. He was quite surprised to find that he had to arrest a man without a head. But Jafar couldn't be easily prevented from doing his duty. The constable tried to hold a person whom he couldn't see at all. In the end, Jafar made the last attempt to hold on the unseen scientist, Griffin. Jafar was knocked down unconscious. Let's know about the word meanings. Muddy, full of mud. Imprints, impressions. Bare, without shoes. Gazed, stared. Remarkable, noticeable. Footmark, footprint. Appeared, was seen. Descending, coming down. Progressing, going ahead. Fascinated, attracted. Fainter, dim. Disappeared, vanished. Mystery, secret. Explanation, clarification. Bewildered, stunned, highly surprised. Transparent, crystal clear. Invisible, clarification. Invisible, unseen. Swallowed, gulped down. Rare, extraordinary. Drugs, medicines. Swallowed, gulped down. Brilliant, here, very bright. Solid, not hollow. Then, brilliant, very bright, very competent or intelligent. Lawless, not obeying law. Eject, to drive out. Revenge, retaliation. Answering back. Wanderer, tramp. Escaped, got away. Adventures, risky acts. Over, ended. Bitterly, severely. Warm, here a little heat. Regard, here caring. Expense, cost. Wide, brimmed. Having, wide boundary. Wrappers, covers. Grocery, provisional store. Quilts, warm covers. Assistants, helpers. So this is all about your lesson, that is the invisible man. I hope everyone enjoyed reading this lesson summary and all, also word meanings. Please go through the notes and update yourself. Okay, till then, see you. Bye bye.